Alrighty, we are getting ready for our Unit 8 quiz. The first type of question that we could see on this quiz is asking us about the transformations. How? If you go from the normal parent function, x squared, that starts at 0, 0, the vertex, how would it change if you added numbers in the parentheses, next to the parentheses, in front of the parentheses? This is a general rule for the transformations. If there is a number to the left of the parentheses, if that number is negative, that would tell us that we reflect the graph over the x-axis, or that it opens downwards. If there is a number that is in between 0 and 1, so most likely a fraction, that would make the graph wider or compressed. And if there is a number that is bigger than 1 in front of the parentheses, that would mean the graph got more narrow or it stretched out. Now, if there is a number inside the parentheses, it's opposite of what you would normally think. So, if there is a negative, it would go to the right. If it's positive, it would go to the left. And then the numbers to the right of the parentheses. If it's negative, that makes the graph go down. And if it's positive, that makes the graph go up. All right, so let's look at this one. They want to know if you had the original parent function, f of x equals x squared. So that's one where the vertex is 0, 0, and then it creates the U shape. And they graph this new function, g of x equals 1/2 x minus 2 squared minus 3. This graph would look something like this. It would look something like this. Okay, it's easy to tell. It's easy to tell that the graph doesn't start at 0, 0 anymore. It's starting more, I graphed this wrong real quick. It's starting more to the right. It's starting more to the right. Why is that? Because when we have a number inside the parentheses, that is a negative. That either means left or right, and because it's negative, that means it goes to the right. Oh wait, so I did have it right the first time that I graphed it. Oopsie, my bad. It was over here. It would be over here. When it's negative, that makes it go to the right. So you would say that this graph goes to the right too. Then when there is a number to the right of the parentheses, it either means up or down. Because this one is negative, that means we go down 3. Those are easy to tell from just looking at the vertex. See, how doesn't the vertex start at 0, 0 anymore? Well, it now goes right 2 and down 3. The one that's a little bit more confusing to tell is this 1/2. Numbers to the left of the parentheses. If the number is in between 0 or 1, that means the graph got wider by 1/2. So maybe on the quiz we could give you a multiple choice question where you would choose all these different transformations. Or we could tell you to graph something and then ask you what is the transformations that occurred. So be ready to state these different rules. Okay, let's look at number 2. Again, they're asking us, how did x squared become g of x, which is x plus 1 squared plus 3? So, remember, x squared starts at 0, 0. It's a parabola that's going upwards that starts at 0, 0. That's the parent function. But now let me graph g of x. This one would look something like this. And what is that? Well, compare your vertexes. I see that we went up. And that is true because the number to the right of the parentheses tells you up or down. Because it's positive, that means we went up 3. Then the numbers inside the parentheses tell you left or right, and it's the opposite of what you think. So, since it's a positive, it actually means we go to the left one. This is an easy one where you really didn't need to memorize the rules. If you just analyze the graph and look at how the vertex changed, it's very easy to tell left and right, which is the number inside the parentheses, or up and down, which is the number outside of the parentheses. All right, now we're going to move on to number 3. Number 3 says, what is an equation of the axis of symmetry of the quadratic function who is shown here? If you guys remember the formula for axis of symmetry, the formula for axis of symmetry is, it's on that reference table that we're all going to get. That formula is x equals negative b over 2a. So, A is the number in front of x squared, which is 3. B is the number in front of x, which is negative 12. And C is the number by itself, which is negative 13. Axis of symmetry, AX, is always x equals negative B. Our B is negative 12, so we're going to have negative 12 over 2, and A is 3. All right, we are going to use our calculator because I don't like to guess on this type of stuff. So let me just open up my calculator. And we are going to write down a fraction. We're going to write down negative 12 over 2 times 3, 2 parentheses 3. And the answer that we get is number 2. So x equals 2. Another way that you guys could have done this is, you guys could graph this. You guys could have graphed 3x squared minus 12x minus 13, and look at a picture of the graph. When you look at a picture of the graph, if you would zoom out, you'd be able to see that to split the graph in half, it would go through x equals 2. Or you guys could look at your table, look for the number where stuff repeats around. What am I talking about? Right here. You see how this negative 2 is this positive 2 is the only one that doesn't repeat? This negative 22 repeats, the negative 13 repeats. This one doesn't repeat. That makes 2, negative 25 your vertex. And axis of symmetry is the x number from the vertex. So x equals 2. All right, let's look at number 4. What is the equation of the axis of symmetry for this parabola? Again, we could write down x equals negative b over 2a. Because that's what axis of symmetry is. A is our 2. B is a number in front of x, which is 8. And C is negative 1. A equals 2. B equals 8. C equals negative 1. So let's look at this formula. X equals negative. B is 8 over 2. And A is 2. And when I type this into my calculator, let me go ahead and type this in. Negative 8 on top. And then 2 times 2 on the bottom gets us negative 2. So it would be answer choice B. Another way we could have done this is we can go to the graph. We could type in 2x squared plus 8x minus 1. And we can look at the graph and we can see that directly in half would be at x equals negative 2. Be prepared that sometimes just the picture can be shown to you and you'll have to draw the line, the vertical line that cuts it in half, and say what x number that is. All right, number 5. What is the range of this function? I need you to know that range means y or it means f of x. Because remember, range is y and the same thing as y is f of x. If you ever see an answer choice from range that's x, we know that's wrong. X is not y. And range means how low to how high does something go. All right, so let's type this in. Let's type in parentheses x plus 4 squared plus 7. And let's graph it. Oh, how low does it go? I see the lowest point is up here in the positive section. So my answer is not going to be, well, it's not x equals 7 because it goes greater than 7. So now, and it's not negative 4 because if I'm talking about y, that is not y negative 4. Now my answer is either 4 or 7. Well, let's see how low this goes. This is in between. This is at y equals 7. It starts by being the lowest point on the graph is y equals 7. So let's do the same thing for number 6. We want to find our range again. In order to find the range, I'm looking how low to how high this graph goes. I'm going to type in x squared minus 4x minus 12. I'm going to make sure that all my answer choices say y, and then I'm going to look and see how low does this graph go. Well, I know it goes somewhere in the negatives. It starts somewhere in the negatives. So I'm going to cancel answer choice B and answer choice C. It's really hard for me to tell if the lowest point is negative 16 or if the lowest point is negative 12. So I'm going to look at the table to help me. And I'm going to see, oh, I do see negative 12 there. But then I also see negative 15, and I also see negative 16. Meaning that my lowest point is negative 16. Very, very good. All right. Let's look at a new type of questions that we can be asked. Keith determines the zeros are negative 6 and 5. What could be his function? Remember, when we are trying to write a function or we're trying to write an equation, we, in the parentheses, is the opposite of what the zeros are. So we got that one of our zeros is negative 6. That means in parentheses, we need to get a positive 6, which is either answer choice B or answer choice C. Then I have a 5. So in parentheses, I need to do the opposite, which would make it negative 5, which is answer choice C. The opposite of negative 6 is positive 6. The opposite of positive 5 is a negative 5. Answer choice C. Same with number 8. This would be a multiple choice question, but let's just see how to do it long response. It says write an equation. Anytime you are asked to write an equation, we are going to write y equals, or you guys could write f of x equals. It says a cubic function. Cubic just means you have 3 different zeros, which I do see here. 4, 2, and negative 1. It would be x. 4, you have to do the opposite of positive 4, which is negative 4. Then x, the opposite of positive 2 is negative 2. And then x, the opposite of negative 1 is positive 1. In order to write equations, you take whatever your zeros are, and whatever sign it is, it's the opposite inside the parentheses. So, similarly, let's look at number 9. A polynomial function contains these factors, x, x minus 2, and x plus 5. Which graph below represents the graph? They want me to take those factors and look for those zeros on my graph, meaning whenever it's x, that's just equal to 0. That's easy. So we need to find one that's at 0. This one starts at 0, great. This one does not start at 0, and this one starts at 0, so that's good. So my answer cannot have 2 in it, so it can't be B, and it can't be C. All right, now I need to determine if 1 has to be the right answer. Is it also 3? Well, let's see. If I had x minus 2, and because it's my zeros, I do x minus 2 equals 0, I would have to add 2 to bring it to the other side, which would make it a positive 2, and the 5 would become a negative 5. So which one is at positive 2 and negative 5? That would only be answer choice A. Because D is the opposite. D is at negative 2 and positive 5. But I know that my factors and my zeros, factors are the ones in parentheses, zeros are where it crosses the x-axis. Those are opposite from each other. All right, let's look at number 10. Based on the graph below, which one of the following expressions is a possible factorization? Okay, let's look at this. We're going to see what number is this at. This is at 1, 2, 3, negative 3. This is at 2, and this is at 4. I don't care about this. This is not an x-intercept. I only care about x-intercepts, roots, zeros, and solutions, which is all the point where the graph crosses the x-axis. So I need an answer choice that has 3 things in it, which is either A or D, and I choose the opposite of what I see there. So in negative 3, if the 0 is negative 3, then in parentheses it would be a positive 3, which is answer choice D. All right, let's look at number 11. Use the technique of completing the square. This is what we learned early on in Unit 8. To write it, and then we're going to write down the axis of symmetry, the vertex, and our range. All right, we could do all this, so let's see it. This one, completing the square. We are going to bring this 14 to the other side. You could keep it as f of x, or you can make it y momentarily if you want to. But we always bring our plain number to the other side. So we are going to get f of x minus 14. Because we are completing the square, I'm going to put a square on both sides. And I end up with that. Then I am going to factor this right side by putting the parentheses, the x, and the squared. I then divide by 2. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Then in parentheses, negative 3 squared is 9. Positive 9. It always has to be a positive. That's the number that's going to go inside the boxes. Leave the f of x alone, and negative 14 plus 9 is negative 5. Now to get rid of minus 5, we are going to add 5. We are going to add 5. And we would end up with f of x equals x minus 3 squared plus 5. And that is the vertex form of our graph. So let's write down the vertex. The vertex is always first the opposite of what's in parentheses. So instead of negative 3, it would be positive 3. And then leave the positive 5 alone. Axis of symmetry, I'm going to label it AOS, is always x equals, and it's x equals whatever your x number is. So x equals 3. And lastly, the range. That means, let me just show you if I was to graph this. Let me just show you if I was to graph the original function I was given. X squared minus 6x plus 14. Or you could graph the new thing that we had. Parentheses x minus 3 squared plus 5. They mean the same thing. If I was to graph this range, you're going to put y. I see my graph goes up, so it's greater than or equal to my smallest number, which is right there, which is the y of our vertex, which is 5. So my range is that y is any number greater than or equal to 5. All right, let's try that again for number 12. I'm going to leave my f of x and I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. And I'll put a square on both sides. So that would give me f of x minus 12 plus a box equals x squared minus 8x plus a square. All right, now I'm going to start the factoring part. That is when I'm going to put parentheses x squared. All right, negative 8 divided by 2 gives me negative 4. And negative 4 squared in parentheses is positive 16. I need to get a positive. And then negative 12 plus 16 gives me 4. So f of x plus 4. You always need to bring that 4 back to the other side. So we are just left with f of x. So I'm going to subtract 4 and I will get f of x is equal to x minus 4 squared minus 4. The three things they want us to write down is first our vertex. Vertex, we do the opposite of the number in parentheses, so it would be a positive 4, comma, keep the number on the outside the same, negative 4. Now our axis of symmetry is always x equals. It's x equals whatever the x number of your vertex is, so x equals 4. And your range, let's type in the original problem or the new one that you found, it doesn't matter. X squared minus 8x plus 12. This is a picture of it. My graph obviously goes up, so it would be y is greater than or equal to. Let's look at our lowest point. Our lowest point would be that negative 4 of the vertex, because that's our minimum point. So y is any point greater than or equal to negative 4. Alrighty, now let's try some graphing questions. We are being asked to graph. We are being asked to graph x squared minus 4x minus 1. Anytime I go to graph these, I look at my table and I look for numbers that repeat, but then there's always one number in the middle, which is called our vertex, that does not repeat. This is the table that I want to write down. You guys can write down more than just these 5 points, but these are your most important 5 points. 0 and negative 1, 1 and negative 4. This is your most important point, 2 and negative 5, 3 and negative 4, and 4 and negative 1. All right, so 0, negative 1 means I don't go left or right, I just go down 1. 1, negative 4 means I go to the right 1 and down 4. 2, negative 5 means I go to the right 2, down 5. 3, negative 4 means I go to the right 3 and down 4. And 4, negative 1 means I go to the right 4 and down 1. Now I'm going to connect these points. I'm going to put arrows, and this is my parabola. The question asks, what is the axis of symmetry, meaning what is the line that goes through the middle? It will always be x equals, and in this case, it's x equals 2. You could also just look for your vertex, which is your point that doesn't repeat, and look at the x number in that point, which is x equals 2. Let's try another example of graphing. I need us to be good at graphing. Let's try another example of graphing. I'm going to type this in. Negative x squared minus 6x, enter. I'm going to click Control T. Well, second T on this one. All right, I'm going to look for my point. That stuff is not repeating. Ah, this looks great. I will get negative 5, 5, negative 4, 8, negative 3, 9, negative 2, 8, negative 1, 5. All right, let's graph this. Go to the left 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then go to the left 4 and up 8. The left 3 and up 9. The left 2 and up 8. The left 1 and up 5. It is an upside down parabola that got reflected over the x-axis, or you say opens downwards, because of that negative that is in front of the x squared. And they want us to state our vertex. They want us to state that number that's in the middle. You could use the Analyze Graph button. And here you'd be analyzing what the maximum point is, because this is the highest, the maximum point on our graph. All right, let's look at this question. Richard is asked to transform the graph of b of x below. He wants to transform it using this function. Describe how this would change. Okay, guys, you need to think about what does a number inside the parentheses do. Inside the parentheses, the number makes it go to the left or it makes it go to the right, but it's opposite of what you think. So because it's negative 2, that means we would want to say it goes to the left 2, but it's actually to the right 2. And then this number, negative 3, the number on the outside makes it go up or down, but it's what you would actually think, so this is down 3. That is our two transformations of what would happen. They would take each of those points in the graph, and they would move each of them to the right 2 and down 3. It would keep the same shape. It would just be transformed or shifted. Let's look at 16. Describe these transformations. So again, what happens when a number is inside parentheses? When a number is inside parentheses, if it's negative, it goes to the right. If it's positive, it goes to the left. When a number is outside the parentheses to the right side, if it's negative, it goes down. If it's positive, it goes up. Very important to start familiarizing yourself with those rules. Okay. Now we are going to look how to solve. Here, number 17, solve algebraically. The first section of your quiz is going to be 2 questions where you have to solve by factoring. That is not the same thing of solving by the square root. So I want to go over how we do this. When we solve by factoring, we want to get it equal to 0. When we solve by factoring, we want to get it equal to 0. So I didn't want that 36 there. It was a positive 36, so I just subtracted. There's no like terms, so I end up just writing it in standard form, which is x squared minus 9x minus 36. Now there is no number I could divide by each of these things, no x. So I'm just going to write down what adds to 9 and what multiplies to negative 36. What adds to 9 and what multiplies to negative 36 would be x minus 12 and x plus 3. I am now going to set each of these things equal to 0. X minus 12 equals 0. I would add 12 to both sides, and that would give me x equals 12. I will then have x plus 3 equals 0. I will subtract 3 from each side. That gives me x equals negative 3. Those are my 2 zeros of the function. That's my solutions. That's my x-intercepts. That's my roots. And I did that through factoring. Let's look at another technique on how to do this through factoring. Okay. Factoring, first step, you want to get it x equals 0, which we do have here. Second step, see if there's a number we could divide. Hey, we could divide by 3. And we could also divide by the variable x, since they both have an x. So 3x would go on the outside. 3 divided by 3 wouldn't give us anything. But x squared divided by x would just be x. Then negative 36 divided by 3 is negative 12, and leave the x alone. Because inside that parentheses it's not x squared or anything, we're done. That's the most factored this could be. We will then have 3x equals 0. Divide by 3, and we get x is equal to 0. 0 is allowed. Stop thinking that 0 is not allowed. Let's look at this next one. X minus 12 equals 0. I'm going to add 12 to both sides. That would give me x equals 12. I got my two answers, x equals 0 and x equals 12. Let's look at 19. We are going to continue by solving by factoring. First, look if there's a number we can divide out. There is 11. Let me just double check. 132 divided by 11 is great. They both have an x, so I'm going to put an x. So my GCF is 11x. 11 divided by 11 is 1. We don't need to write that. X squared divided by x is just x. Then negative 132 divided by 11 is negative 12. And x divided by x is nothing. All right. We now set each of these equal to 0. 11x equals 0. Divide by 11, we get x equals 0. This one, x minus 12 equals 0. Add 12 to both sides, we get x equals 12. Same answer as before, but completely different problem. That's funny. All right. And let's look at this last one that is asking us to solve by factoring. It's important that we use whatever technique we were told. Here, I could divide by 4, but I cannot divide by any x since there is no x in front in both of them. That gives me x squared minus 16 equals 0. Because in the parentheses I was left with a squared, and there's not two terms, this is a difference of perfect squares. The square root of x squared, to separate it, would just be x and x. And the square root of 16 is positive 4 and negative 4. We will set each of these equal to 0. 4 equals 0, doesn't work. X plus 4 equals 0. We subtract 4. We get x equals negative 4. And then x minus 4 equals 0. We add 4 to both sides. We get x equals positive 4. Great. That is factoring to solve the quadratics. We are now going to do two questions where we are going to solve by taking the square root. This is where you do not need to make it equal to 0. We need to get x by itself. But here I need to get the x minus 1 by itself since it's in that parentheses, that fence. So I will divide by 6, divide by 6. That would give me x minus 1 squared equals. I will then do 324 divided by 6, and I get 54. I still need to unlock my fence. I'm going to do that by taking the square root of both sides. X minus 1 equals. I'm going to do square root of 54 up here. What number can go into 54? Try your perfect squares. 36, 24, let's try 16. 54 divided by 16, no good. Let's try 9. Hey, that works, 9 and 6. The square root of 9 is positive and negative 3 and leaves square root of 6 alone. Positive and negative 3, square root of 6. I then do not want this minus 1 here, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. When you add 1 to both sides, you cannot combine any of this because one of them has a square root, one of them doesn't. So our answer is x equals 1 plus or minus 3 square root of 6. You could leave your answer just like that. Alrighty. And let's look at this last technique, this last question, again, where they're telling us to factor by taking the square root. This one is already equal to 0. We don't need to do that, but it's just given to us like that. We need to get the x plus 3 by itself. So first I will add 64 to both sides. That will give me 2 parentheses x plus 3 squared equals 64. I am still not good to take the square root until I get rid of that 2. So that would give me x plus 3 squared equals 32. I now am able to unlock the parentheses, the fence, because the only thing left is just those parentheses. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I'm going to do the square root of 32 up here. I know 16 and 2 works. And the square root of 16 is positive or negative 4. Leave square root of 2 alone. So I will get x plus 3 equals positive and negative 4 square root of 2. Now I don't want that plus 3 there because I want to find out what x equals, not what x plus 3 equals. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and I will get x is equal to, leave the plain number, the constant by itself, negative 3, then put plus or minus 4 square root of 2. That is the format we want to write in. So everything that could be on the quiz is first, solving quadratics by taking the square root. Then solving quadratics by factoring. There could be questions on transformations. You will definitely be asked to graph something and then a follow-up question. You will be asked to complete the square. You will be asked to write an equation where you will know what your zeros are, but the number in parentheses is the opposite sign. And then you can be asked to find the axis of symmetry, which is the line that goes through the middle. And then again, you could also be asked transformations. So that is everything that could be on your quiz of the first half of Unit 8. Happy studying!